On the significance of the United Nations General Assembly and President Tinubu's attendance, I'm joined by CEO Economic Associates Dr. Ayo Teriba, who joins me live from Lagos. Dr. Teriba, let's begin with how efficiently you think the United Nations has been able to keep its core mandate of international peace and security, particularly when you consider what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, as well as the many global conflicts that we're dealing with?
Well, you have to commend the United Nations for maintaining global peace, global harmony. Russia, invasion of Ukraine, the Russian-Ukraine war notwithstanding. These are isolated, cases. You can't compare it with, the toxic paths in which the world was fragmented, into, factions, where you had the Cold War, build up of armaments, and only some countries, forming what they call the non-aligned movement. Increasingly, there is global peace and harmony, and exceptions cannot prove the rule. Let's hope that the Russian tension will end sooner rather than later. The world goes more by the way of dialogue, and there's no better global platform for dialogue than the United Nations.
All right, so let's talk about Nigeria's engagement in the UNGA event, which has officially begun today. We understand our president will be will be kickstarting the debate tomorrow with his inaugural address. And on Wednesday, he's slated to participate in the high-level dialogue on financing for development. He will also possibly advance his economic development agenda for what we've seen now to be an aggressive investment attraction in his meetings with global leadership of transnational firms. We also are hearing that some of these firms would include Microsoft, Meta Technologies, ExxonMobil, General Electric, and a few others. What are the real potential opportunities here for Nigeria?
Well, this is presenting a very good opportunity for Nigeria to reconnect and reintegrate into the global mainstream, that is today being driven more by investment flows than by goods and services flows. In the past, it was about flow of goods and services that seemed to have peaked in the past decade and is most likely to decline. But you are finding, investment stocks, in particular, foreign direct investment stocks, doubling more like every 10 years, and Nigeria has largely missed out of that process over the past 2 decades. So Nigeria is fortunate, to have in the saddle a president that is awake, to the strategic significance of investment to Nigeria's quest for what he has described as renewed hopes. And if what happened in India is anything to go by, going to India and in a matter of days coming back with pledges of 14 billion US dollars in foreign direct investments is a first, for Nigeria. The last time I was on your program, we were speaking about the NMPC having secured $3 billion, not in investment, in debt, now. And I was saying on that occasion that we are not looking for $3 billion, we are looking for 30 billion. We are looking for 50 billion. In between that time and now, the president has secured 14 billion. The figures they are talking about from UAE is also likely to be in the 2 digits. And now you have the biggest stage in the world.
Let me butt in. Dr. Teriba,
Yeah.
how reliable are these figures you're quoting? Because at face value, it's promised investment, right? How reliable do you think this will be in real figures when it comes to having the boots on ground here in the country?
Well, all global investment figures, particularly uh, greenfield investment, are based on investment announcements. Investors don't just announce uh, the, the amounts that they are going to invest. When they announce it, it eventually happens. So there is not in our place. You've had a decade or two in which nobody promised you anything. And now that you have, it may look too good to believe, but it is real. That's how it starts, and then it's followed, by agreements, and it's followed, by consummation of the deals. Now the president is going to meet other countries. We have bilateral talks with other countries, including Brazil, and in particular the European Union, the European Commission. That's not one country, at this meeting, and it should present, very valuable opportunities. We can replicate what we did in India or with in UAE with some of these countries. And then the president is also meeting, as you have mentioned, the leadership of several transnational, companies. So it's a wonderful opportunity for Nigeria. It's coming at a time that Nigeria needs it. This is not the first time a Nigerian president will have the opportunity to be at this summit. Our presidents attend this summit annually, but this is the first time that you have seen how the present president is capacity to seize opportunities.
I hear you,
And
Dr.
I'm hoping
Dr.
that
Teriba. So let's assume that we're taking your word for it. How soon can Nigerians begin to feel the impact of this potential investment? Is it a long-term project or a medium-term project? Is it something that, the fruits and the dividends can be garnered in the lifetime of this administration?
Okay, while we're talking about investment, remember that when the coordinating minister gave his maiden press conference, he did say that Nigeria is moving away from debt financing to equity financing. And in the past, you can announce plans to go and issue Euro bonds, do a roadshow, and once you make the issue and the subscriptions come in, it's cash for you in a few months. Investments are no different. And you have, a variety, of foreign investment types. You have the greenfield investment, which is basically cross-border M&A, like the talks we were having, about Indorama and the Daikon and some Indian investment interests. If it's about, acquisition of shares, in Daikon, that's immediate cash, more or less a matter of months. It's not a matter of years. So, and you can talk of greenfield. Greenfield could take years, for the ultimate benefits of the investment to crystallize. But the funds arrive when the the LNG investment commitments were made. All parties paid the money straight into escrow accounts. So if you commit to make a greenfield investment, you commit the funds up front. It took 5 years to construct the LNG plants, and it will take 27 years for them for the full gestation period of the. So we are talking of two things. When does the cash arrive? Most of the cash will arrive immediately. When does if it involves construction or if it involves operations, that could take time.
So from the G20 summit in India, the G77 summit in Cuba, where the president was represented by his vice president, and the trip to the United Arab Emirates that you talked about, the president seems to have ramped up this attempt at getting the FDIs and international trades. When we return after this break, Dr. Teriba, we'll be asking what you think Nigeria should be doing differently in order to create an enabling environment for these potential investments. Stay with us, everyone.
I, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, do solemnly swear
Ayo Teriba is the CEO, Economic Associates. He joins me on the program this evening to discuss the United Nations General Assembly, as well as the prospects Nigeria have in the ongoing summit in New York. Thank you for staying the course of the program this evening. So there's a reason why Nigeria hasn't been, quite frankly, an investment destination for most countries of the world. We've seen quite a number of activities in this regard in the past few weeks with the president's effort to getting more investors. But the big question would be, have we done anything differently to make Nigeria, that kind of environment where such investments will thrive?
Very good question. There are two views about the past, and the two views are: one, it was either that investors were snubbing Nigeria, or that Nigeria was snubbing investors. And you are implying that Nigeria has to do something differently, for investors not to snub. So which means you believe that investors did snub Nigeria. Investors never snubbed Nigeria. The opposite is true. Nigeria snubbed investors. Nigeria preferred creditors to investors. At home and abroad, Nigeria never, investors give you equity. Nigeria never offered any equity issue. We would prefer to go to Eurobonds and issue debt, than announce equity. When we announced equity investment in LNG, it was subscribed for. When we announced, it's now in the 7th train, when we announced in GSM telephony, it was saturated, investors came. And the lessons of the past few weeks as the president went to India and he went to UAE is that we've discovered the eagerness of investors to make commitments to Nigeria. It's not that we were doing any hard sell. They've been keen. Many of them have traveled here to Nigeria before, trying to invest in Nigeria. Nigeria is the 7th largest population in the world, the biggest in Africa, Middle East, or Europe. Why would investors not be interested? And many of the sectors that can absorb large-scale investment are owned by government. Power transmission, rail, we've let telecoms go. So Nigeria should stop snubbing investors. And that's the example that Asiwaju is providing. And to your question about beyond India, beyond G20, beyond UN General Assembly meeting, what should Nigeria now do differently? All you need to do differently, now that you've used these as test cases to establish that investors are indeed eager to expand investment in Nigeria, fundable investment projects.
Say that again, Dr. Teriba. I think we lost you for a minute.
Origination is very, very weak. There are so many investment potential. Oh, okay.
You were talking precisely what Nigeria can do differently. Can you take it up from there?
Yes. So, fine. Let's take what happened in India and in UAE, and presumably what we'll see happen in Onga, as test cases that have confirmed the abiding interest of investors in Nigeria. And Nigeria now has to come up with a list of fundable projects that we are willing to allow investors to come and take equity stakes in, both greenfield, brownfield, and in the project financing space, which is referred to as PPP or concessioning. So Nigeria had shut investors out, defining creditors. Right now, the coordinating minister for the economy has signaled that we have no interest in further increasing debt. We want to issue equity, but what we need is not to get to India for investors to tell you we want this sector, we want that sector. Let's come up with our own list of the investment opportunities. That if investors do bring the funds, they can invest in them.
I'm also wondering if there are, if there are ways to better take advantage of these potential investments. For instance, they will say Nigeria has relatively some of the cheapest labor you can get anywhere in the world. What's there for the Nigerian people in the short term if, for instance, there are new businesses, new corporations setting up in this part of the world?
Right. Well, in some sectors, they are looking for cheap labor. In some sectors, they are not even looking for cheap labor. They are looking for skills. And the world knows, the wealth of Nigeria, the biggest wealth that Nigeria possesses is human capital. It doesn't have to be cheap. It only has to be available and capable. So come up with a list. If Saudi, started on this journey around 2016, 2017. They came up with what they describe as
We're probably going to have to work on that connection, Dr. Teriba. We can hardly hear you from here. All eyes on the United Nations General Assembly, where President Tinubu is officially visiting the United States for the very first time since he emerged president. And we're also looking at what the theme of this year is focused on: accelerating action on the 2030 agenda, as well as its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. There are just 7 more years to the target of the 2030 agenda. The big question will be how much progress has been made by the countries around the world, particularly the United Nations, in achieving these goals. And how, for instance, particularly when you talk about equitable prosperity for all, and if there is genuineness on the part of the West, for instance, to also reach out to the African continent. A lot will be talked about, particularly when President Tinubu gives a speech tomorrow at the once the debate is open. Is expected to also participate in some high-level dialogue on financing, high-level meeting on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, as well as the UN Secretary General's Climate Ambition Summit, where a lot is expected to be mentioned about Nigeria's role and how we can do better in that regard. Dr. Teriba, just before we go, I was going to get your position on how much progress you think we have made with the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly with achieving equitable prosperity for all.
Oh, well, we are very familiar with the situation in Nigeria's economy as the current administration met it. And, the coordinating minister for the economy said they didn't meet the economy in a very good state. So let's concentrate on the now and what the current administration should do towards meeting the sustainable development.
I was even referring to the, attempt or perhaps the plans of the United Nations itself, all of the over 193 countries of the UN, how much progress do you think the world has made in that regard, particularly from the developed countries of the world?
Significant progress on a global scale. But you see, you have to put countries in, the three categories. Developing countries who are leading in the process of meeting the sustainable development, the ones who are following, and the ones who are lagging. And I'm afraid, if any of the indicators, the government itself has no money, if you have foreign exchange crisis, if you have double-digit inflation device, etc., it's not surprising if you say Nigeria is among those who are lagging with the poverty figures, to the unemployment figures. So the world is making progress. Developing country after developing countries are advancing. Nigeria needs to join that bandwagon. Basically, that would be my.
Dr. Ayo Teribai, CEO, Economic Associates. I'm afraid that's our time this evening. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to how much gains Nigeria will make this time. That's our show today. You can watch a repeat broadcast at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.